Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you so much for being here at this time. I know this is not an easy task to be seated here after spending all the day. My name is Dr. Hasib Raza. I am working as an electrophysiologist at the National Institute of Cardiovascular Disease in Pakistan. I have honor of writing an ECG review book and a couple of publications in my hand. So, we were talking about the athletes. The second thing that comes into mind when we are talking about athletes is the sudden cardiac death. And the third thing with the sudden cardiac death and athletes is the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So I will try to make the things quick for you and make the things crisp for you. With the incidence of 1 into 500 and running in an autosomal dominant fashion, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy has the most common gene involvement called the MYH7 gene and the MYBPC3 gene. It is the most common cause of sudden cardiac death in young athletes. Thanks to the ICDs, we have reduced the mortality, but before the ICD era, it was about 1.5% per year, and now it is reduced to less than 1%. The patient come in the clinic with the chest pain, shortness of breath, palpitations, syncope, and you can sometimes pick them in the asymptomatic patients when you have a systolic ejection number. Typical ECG, left ventricular hypertrophic pattern. I'm not going to go into detail, you have already seen the. Sometimes, okay, so if I can use the pointer, sometimes you can look at these delta waves because they have this association with the WPW syndrome. Okay. So the diagnostic criteria for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is the wall thickness of more than 15 mm in one or more segments. And here you can see the left ventricular wall thickness, the mode modality SAM, systolic notching, and the gradients. This is very important. I don't want to miss it. So here's a patient, and we did the echo, and this is the gradient. This is the resting gradient. And when you provoke the patient, look at the numbers. The mark change. Why is this important? I will tell you in a while. So sometimes you have to provoke the patient to get the real, the hidden LVOT obstruction gradient, which can help you in the management of such disease. CMR, when you are not okay with the echo windows, please choose the CMR. And what about cardiac CT? Cardiac CT should be considered in patients who have inadequate echocardiographic imaging or contraindications for CMR like contrast, allergy to gadolinium. Okay, so let's start with the arrhythmias. Atrial fibrillation, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Most common atrial arrhythmia that you can see in these patients. And as compared to the general population, 4 to 6 times more prevalent in this disease. And if you compare the patients having hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with sinus rhythm and the other group having atrial fibrillation, the group with atrial fibrillation is 8 times more at risk of developing this stroke, ischemic stroke. And when you have this atrial fibrillation, the one thing that you are most concerned is the complication of atrial fibrillation is the embolization, cerebral embolization. You will never want your patient to get this ischemic stroke. What is the pathophysiology? Fibrosis, ischemia, obstruction. The obstruction leads to mitral regurgitation, which leads to increase in the left atrial diastolic pressure, which leads to increase in the left atrial size. Whatever is the mechanism, whenever you have an increase in left atrial size, you will get atrial fibrillation. Exactly when you have fibrosis, that leads to the origin of ectopic focus, you get atrial fibrillation. Ischemia can also aggravate it. Okay, so now you know that atrial fibrillation is so important and you want to prevent your patient from developing an ischemic stroke. What about the patients who have the atrial fibrillation but they are not symptomatic? Would you like to screen them?
لو سمحتوا الكلام اللي في آخر القاعة ما ينفعش.
So for the asymptomatic patient, the ESC says that 48-hour holter can be performed every 6 to 12 months. But if the left atrial size is more than 45 millimeter. Otherwise, no. Regarding the anticoagulation, you want to prevent, you must anticoagulate. Systemic anticoagulation reduces the risk of ischemic stroke. Okay, we all know that. The CHA2DS2-VASc score, is it reliable in this disease? So the data suggests no. Regardless of CHA2DS2-VASc, you have to anticoagulate your hypertrophic cardiomyopathy patient when he or she is in atrial fibrillation. And even with only one episode of atrial fibrillation, you have to anticoagulate. You cannot leave the patient alone. So the question: which patients with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and AFib should receive anticoagulation? And the answer is very simple: all of them. Don't lose them. And which anticoagulant is preferable? Warfarin or novel anticoagulants? Okay, the first priority in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is warfarin. If there are side effects of warfarin, the patient is not compliant to warfarin, there are food or drug interactions with warfarin, shift to the novel anticoagulants. Rate versus rhythm, control for atrial fibrillation. Okay, so there is uncertainty whether you should go for rate or whether you should go for rhythm. But if you start for rate control strategy, we can divide it like this. For persistent and permanent AFib, use beta blockers, rate limitators. Beta blockers, non-diabetic calcium channel blockers. And if you are going for rhythm control strategy, for new onset AFib, go for cardioversion. Maybe electrical or maybe pharmacological. And for the pharmacological cardioversion, the best drug is amiodarone. Thanks to God that we have amiodarone. I don't know what we will be doing without amiodarone. And the best drug for preventing the recurrent AFib, this is the main issue. You cardiovert the patient goes home, and after 3 months he comes back with atrial fibrillation. Again amiodarone. So this is the best drug for preventing the recurrence. So after all the discussion, who needs the catheter ablation of atrial fibrillation? Atrial fibrillation catheter ablation can be beneficial in patients in whom you want to go for the rhythm control strategy and the anti-arrhythmic drugs they get failed or the patient is not able to tolerate. This is the only indication when you go for ablating the atrial fibrillation in the background of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Okay, so this is a study in 2010 and efficacy of ablation for AFib in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, effective phase. So the conclusion is, the most important point in this thing is they were able to ablate the AFib, but the redo procedures were often necessary. So this is in 2010. Moving on to 2013. Late recurrences. So you will be able to ablate it, but the patient will come here again. Let's go to 2016. Patient with HOCM feasible, more repeat procedures. So you need anti-arrhythmic drugs along after the procedure, and same thing here. Okay, switching gears to ventricular arrhythmias, ventricular tachycardia, the sudden cardiac death. Annual incidence is of 1 to 2%, which accounts with the heart failure also and the thromboembolism being the main causes of death. The pathophysiology includes myocardial fibrosis, myovascular ischemia, cellular disarray, the arrangement changes, and all these things they trigger the ventricular arrhythmias in such patients. So when you have a patient of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in your clinic, would you like to stratify him for sudden cardiac death? Yes. At the initial evaluation, yes, and after every 1 to 3 years, yes. And these are the factors, you already know them. Some are for secondary prevention, others are for primary. And remember these potential risk modifiers. This is according to the AHA. Remember these 4 things. Okay, so if you have a patient with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, sudden cardiac death survivor, sustained VD, yes, okay, go for ICD. No, family history is there, thickness is there, syncope, yes, go for ICD. No, non-sustained PT, abnormal BP response, yes, here it is, risk modifiers. Now you have to find these 4 things in this category. If yes, go for ICD, otherwise just leave him alone. evaluate for certain cardiac death after 1 year might be. We are the EP guys. Do we have to do something here? Is there any role of EP study? And the answer is, for the sudden cardiac death risk stratification, no need. The simple answer is this. But EP studies can help to clarify the diagnosis of wide complex tachycardia or guide therapy for SVT or bundle branch reentry. Because if you get to diagnose bundle branch reentry, or you are getting a patient who is coming again and again due to SVTs, you can ablate the SVT or the other VT, and the patient will be free of these episodes. So in this scenario, the EP study is definitely helpful, but not for the sudden cardiac death risk stratification. What about the first degree relatives? I want to make one thing clear here. Okay, so because of the cost issues, we do not go for the genetic testing, which is included in the guidance. So if you can afford the genetic testing, go for the genetic testing first. If you have the genes positive, then you call the first degree relatives, do the genetic testing in them, and then afterwards do the clinical evaluation. Okay? You cannot do the genetic testing in your patient, then reverse it. Call the first degree relatives, do the clinical evaluation first. If you find something, then go ahead. And you do the clinical screening with ECG and echo. So what if the patient genotype is positive, but the patient has no risk factor for sudden cardiac death? Will you put an ICD? He has genotype positive. If you do not have any sudden cardiac death factors, there is no need of putting an ICD, even if it is positive for genotype. And what about the patients who are at high risk of sudden cardiac death? And you will have, might have experienced these patients, and the patient says, no, I'm not waiting for ICD, sorry, I cannot go for it. What will you do then? The patient is at high risk of. What we have left with is thanks to Midodrone. Again, we are going to use this drug for such patients who, due to any problem or whatever is the reason, is not going for implantation. Regarding ICD, few points. As ATL leads do not reduce the incidence of inappropriate shocks, most patients require only a single ventricular lead. Beta blockers and amiodarone are recommended in patients with an ICD who continue to have symptomatic VTEs or recurrent shocks despite the optimal treatment or device reprogramming. So the drugs are always in your hands, whether you put an ICD or whether you do not put an ICD. And EP study in patients with ICDs and inappropriate shocks due to regular supraventricular tachycardias, so that you can get a grip if there is underlying any supraventricular tachycardia, and you can update it so that the patient will not come again back to you with the inappropriate shocks. So European, and this was published in European Heart Journal, the ESC has come with this hypertrophic cardiomyopathy risk sudden cardiac death predictor. These are the different variables. This is the formula, and you can find this app on your mobile. Just put in the numbers, and here we go. 5-year risk is less than 4%. ICD is generally not indicated. 5-year risk more than 6%. ICD should be considered, and this is the case one. So, okay, that's about the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I would like to take advantage of this opportunity, and I would like to introduce you to this new emerging society, the International Young Academy of Cardiology. Its first session was this year in Turkey, and what they did, they have invited all over young cardiologists, electrophysiologists, interventional cardiologists from around the world, and there was an election for the board members selection, and luckily I got through it, and I am the board member. The aim of this society is to bring the people like you, all of you, at the stage, the hidden talent. What we do, we try to give the chance. If you have the talent, please come on the stage, show yourself, try to contribute into the cardiac society. And this is my Facebook page group. I created this last year. Most of you know it. I'm just advertising it right now so that many people can contribute to it. The same theme here. It's been almost 12 to 13 months, and I have right now more than 6,000 members from across the world. And the theme is just to integrate between the young cardiologists, especially the EP lovers, and obviously the electrophysiologists, using the social media for a positive thing. Thank you so much.